I know what you're thinking. New car? Yep. Also, new mic. And I think it's still picking up a little bit of wind noise, but I don't think it's going to be as bad. So, this is a 325 Ti, as you can tell by the horrendous headlights. Compact BMW. The main bit, that it's a 2.5 litre 6-cylinder. I've owned it over a year now. Plans are for it to be a drift car, but I haven't got around to that yet. Still need to put the diff in. Anyways, today's video I'm going to show you all my things you should look out for before you take your car for an MOT. That's a UK MOT, by the way. What is an MOT? It's just basically a yearly check that you have to do, and if you don't pass, your car's not road legal. Simple as that. So, we're going to start off with the first thing with lights. Now, two ways you can do this, three ways. Get somebody outside, you flash all the lights, see if you can see them or not. The person will relay back to you if they can. If not, go change the bulbs. You can also park in front of a shiny car or a mirror and you can watch yourself flash them. Or you can do what I'm doing and film it and then review the footage later. I'm going to cycle through all the lights, make sure all the lights are working. I'm going to put them on, I'm going to switch them off, I'm going to flash them, I'm going to do my high beams, so I'm going to just make sure they're all working. And don't forget, check your number plate lights. Appears to be I'm missing a cover. So, the handbrake, usually about 3 or 5 clicks. That's usually pretty good and should get you past an MOT. That was 4 clicks. If yours is a bit loose and it pulls up a bit further, all you need to do in most cars is take off the surround and then tighten up the adjusters underneath there. There's the adjusters there. Just tighten them up. I like to do it the day before the actual MOT inspection. That way your handbrake will be solid. Check your window wipers. Make sure your car's turned on. Check your window wipers. Make sure that they actually clear the windscreen and that you have fluid in your window washers. Now, time for the good stuff. Underneath the engine bay. So, things to look out for when you're coming up for an MOT on your engine bay is that you want to check the engine, make sure there's no leaks or anything. This BMWs like to leak right at the rocket cover gasket. They also like to leak on the oil housing, oil filter housing as well. So you want to check that, make sure there's no leaks, make sure there's no leaks underneath as well. You want to check your air filter, make sure it's good, make sure everything's secure. You want to check your fluids as well. So you see I need a little bit more windscreen washing there. And then finally you want to check your battery. Now obviously in a BMW the battery's in the boot, but you want to make sure that it's secure, tight, and it's not moving and it can't flop about. For tyres and wheels, you need to make sure for first of all that your tyres are well within their tread wear gauges. There's plenty of tread on them. See these little nubs? Make sure the tyre isn't old and dry rotted as well. Then you want to be checking that your alloys are okay. They're all round and sound. There's no cracks in them. Also, good idea to just fill up your tyres to the correct pressures. That's not just for the MOT, that's for just in general rules of driving as well. Quickest way to check wheel bearings and just for suspension is to jack up the car and then spin the wheel. And also if you grab the wheels by side, that should tell you if there's any play in the suspension. And if you grab the wheel at top and bottom and then wiggle it that way as well, that should tell you if your wheel bearing's bad or not. So you're going to want to check your springs in all 4 corners, make sure they're not snapped. Make sure they're looking good and they're not too badly corroded. Snap springs will fail an MOT and are dangerous. You also want to check the dampers as well in all 4 corners, make sure they're not leaking any oil or anything. You're going to want to check your discs as well. make sure there's no lips on them. Make sure they're nice and kind of flat. You're also going to want to check your pads. Make sure there's plenty of meat left on the pads. Also check the calipers, make sure they can move and the piston moves freely as well. You're going to want to check your brake lines as well. Make sure none of them are snapped or leaking. You want to check your anti-roll bar links. Make sure they're not snapped, make sure they're not clunking, making noise when you're going over bumps. You want to also check your ball joints, make sure they're not clunking. Usually they would clunk over bumps, so if they're not really clunking over bumps then they should be okay. To check the exhaust, you want to be going down the full length of the exhaust, making sure there's no leaks. Make sure all the hangers are still attached and the exhaust is still attached to the car. You want to also check your CV joint boots as well. Make sure they're not cracked and leaking CV grease everywhere. And you also want to check any diffs, gearboxes for oil leaks as well. And finally, the last one, rust. Rust is a pretty common failure on a lot of cars, and it's also the end of a lot of cars. Rust like this isn't too bad because it's not structural. If the rust was, say, somewhere near the strut top mounts or even down by the jacking points in the sills, this is bad news. This needs cut out and replaced. Sometimes a patch doesn't cost that much. It's always worth investigating, especially if you love the car. Let's recap all the points to check. So we've got lights, windscreen, handbrake, oil leaks from the engine, battery, fluid levels, wheel bearings, wheels and tyres, suspension components like bushes, drop links, ball joints, springs and dampers. Then we've got stuff on the brakes, so check your discs, your pads and your calipers. Then we check the exhaust, the gearbox for any leaks and the diff for any leaks. Then we check the drivetrain and the CV boots. And then finally, rust. An MOT is a visual inspection, but if they do find something, they will investigate a bit more. If they find a patch of rust, they've got a tiny little hammer that they're allowed to use that doesn't really apply much force, that they test the area, and if it crumbles away then obviously it's a fail. But they're not allowed to take off wheels and sill covers to investigate further. They are literally only allowed to touch what they see. Also, whilst you're there, they test the emissions of your vehicle, plus also the brakes. They test emissions by putting a probe into the exhaust, and then this just measures to see if your catalytic converter or your DPF is still working up to what it should be. For your brakes, they put your car onto a set of rollers and then they test the brakes to make sure that the car is braking evenly and one brake isn't taking over and pulling the car to one side if you were to use your brakes. So yeah, a few things to check. Takes a couple of minutes, but you might as well check them yourself before you spend the money of going through an MOT and then finding out your car's junk. Also, you can just do these checks before you go on a long drive because you might as well make sure your car's roadworthy and safe and you're not going to break down. Anyways folks, I'm going to leave it at that. Try to keep this video short as always. Leave a like on this video so other people can find this video. Might help them out. And I hope I catch you in another video. See you later.